Alright, so we're holding Hilchos Basar B'Chalav, Siman Tzadik Gimel. What I decided to do tonight is to not go into the actual Siman, even though it's a very short Siman, but to review something we did in Hilchos Taaruvot, and that is certain important concepts that apply to both Taaruvot and Basar B'Chalav that will help us understand the next few Simonim. One of them is Tam Ki'ikar. The whole idea of Tam is something that, of course, is brought out in Sif Aleph that talks about Igdero, which is Fleishik, which is the sorest, that once something is made Fleishik, you cannot use it for milk. Even though we're not talking about cooking Basar B'Chalav together, obviously, we're now entering the area of Tam. In other words, even though you don't have Basar per se and Chalav per se, but you have Tam. The Tam within the walls of the Keli present a problem too. And if you did, it's going to be Osir Benoisen Tam. In other words, we're going to have to figure out how much Tam there is. We're going to have to figure out if that's possible. And we're going to need to figure out, which is more easy to figure out, is how much is there in the Tafshil. Whereas, because the Tafshil is right now what we're concerned about more than anything else. The Keli, as we will see, becomes Osir either way for the time being to use it for either Basar or Chalav. Once it has absorbed the two tamim that should not be together. Even though each one by themselves is heter, basar and chalav by themselves are heter, it's not an isur vela that we're talking about. We're not talking about cooking in a pot of a goy, which is a real isur. Nonetheless, the fact that you have the two together presents a problem now. It may be a problem of isur behano, depending on the timing and how much time difference there was between the cooking of the basar and the chalav. Either way, we will be exposed to this idea of tam in the various simonim that are coming. We will be exposed to another concept called noisin tam lifgam, right? So, and we will be exposed to something called davar chorev. So, what I decided to do is perhaps review, maybe not as much as in depth, but through the various shitas of what is tam ki'ikar, who holds what? Is it the rice or the rabbanon? When does something become noisin tam lefgam? What causes it to become lefgam? In other words, that it's I guess defective or foul, insipid. How's that one? Yeah. And under what circumstances do we allow to use a keli that is pogum? Can you just use it? Once it's pogum, or even once it's pogum, the tam in the keli, that is it still a problem? Because there's different kinds of pagam. There's the pagam of the ma'achal, of the food, and there's, in other words, the food can be pogum. The food can make the tafshul pogum, even though the food is not pogum. And you have the type of pagima that is in the keli itself, as a result of having a certain amount of time elapse from the first time that the food was cooked in that pot. And apparently, as we will see, when a certain amount of time, and we will see how much that time is, elapses from the initial bishul, it causes whatever tam is there, and we're concerned about tam, to become pogum. There's also called tamoy umamoshoy. And briefly, what tam umamoshoy means, as opposed to plain tam, is that you actually have the entire isser pretty much melting away into the contents of the gdera. So it's not just a tam, a flavor of the original isser that we may be detecting. We actually have the whole thing in there, just that we can't detect it. In other words, it's no longer, because we're melting away as opposed to seeing it, as opposed to be'ein. As opposed to be'ein. In other words, it's there, but it's not there. I can't see it. And so when we talk about tamu mamoshoy, a whole sugi in the Gemara, dealing with these questions, it's very significant, as we will see. It makes a big difference because, for the most part, there's almost no argument that once you have the tamu and the mamoshoy of the iser in the pot, it's not a matter of time anymore. It's the iser there too. The whole iser is there. And because of the mamoshoy there's no bittul necessarily. In other words, because the iser is pretty much still in existence. So much so that you can feel it. You can still feel it, as opposed to just having the tam of something falls under a totally different category. That's where we get into the machlokes of tam ke'ikar. Really touches more on the issues relating to pure tam, pure flavor.
When you said the necessary misbuttal,
Yeah.
did you mean if it's the aim, or did you mean or something like that?
No. It's just a matter of that the mamasha creates a situation where the Isser is considered not bottle. In other words,
Generally speaking,
Yeah.
if I have three systems, one of
right.
which is brave.
No, not sausages. We're not talking about sausages
I'm
because.
not sure what we are.
Okay, maybe I didn't explain. Mamasha, I'm talking about a specific situation where I don't see it at all as a solid Isser. In other words, whatever Isser I once upon a time had has completely disintegrated into the tafshil and is no longer.
Can I remove?
No.
So it's not misbuttal.
It may still become misbatal if you have the right shear, obviously.
Right.
But as a result of the mamashas being in there, it enhances the tam. In other words, the dynamics of the mamashas is no more, is actually more of a problem than having plain tam, because the mamashas enhances.
So what are you
It
saying
gives
that
it
I have a bigger problem with the tom because of the presence
because of the
mamashas?
presence of the mamashas. Yeah.
So what we're talking about is
Right.
still a problem with the tom.
Yes, of course.
Only that I can't get rid of this problem as easily
Right,
if the
that's-
mamashas
yeah.
is present.
Right.
Uh-huh.
That's what I
That
recall.
didn't
Yeah,
understand.
that's what I recall. That in other words, in that case, it's still a problem of tam, but it's a tam that's coming from the mamashas still being there, as opposed to plain tam of a piece of Isser that fell into the Ktera, which I removed. And all I have here is the tam that was emitted from the original Isser, but the Isser is not. There is a big difference
With respect to the tom.
with respect to the tam, right? It's still a problem with the tam. Yeah, because this is a tam of mamoshes. This is essentially mamoshes.
I'm very curious about
Yeah,
that because
exactly. In other words, when you have the mamoshes, you still have the tam, but you're having the tam of the mamoshes here, as opposed to having the tam only coming from the Isser that has been removed and is no longer there. I'm having a reminder of the Isser. That is what the machlokes and tam ki'irke concerns, is much more on the tam, the plain tam by itself, having come from the Isser no longer being there. Do I treat that tam ke'ikar, a Isser, or not?
So wait a second.
Right.
So now we're starting to understand what you're saying.
Right.
So let's see if I understand you correct. If I hold tom ke'ikr, then it makes no difference with respect to the problem. I can the tom is there, the mamashas is there as well or not. If I hold tom ke'ikr.
Right, that's correct.
Whether or not I hold tom ke'ikr can be contingent on whether or not I think that there is more of a problem in the tom if the mamashas is there.
Yes.
In other words, if I hold the tom not ke'ikr, then in order to have a real problem with the tom, the oraisa, I need to have the ikr present.
That's correct.
Otherwise, the problem I had with the tom would be only be the rabbana.
That's right.
But if I hold tom ke'ikr, it doesn't make
Doesn't
a
make a difference whatsoever.
Okay, now I get it. Very
Well,
good.
thank you for further clarifying
I
it. Yes.
didn't understand what you were
Yes.
saying.
Uh-huh.
Would it make a difference as that? How much difference that?
Well, not really, because in the end, we need a shear.
Mushes.
No, not so much. No, as Ilan was saying, if you hold tam ki'ikr, then it's a problem regardless. You need the same amount to be
Even if you
mevatel.
don't hold tom ke'ikr, wouldn't you always, you need to mevatel it still, even if
You
it's
still need to
rabbanan.
mevatel it, yeah.
Wouldn't you always go by the quantity of mamashas that caused tom?
Well, sure, still.
No matter what. Even
No matter
tom
what.
ke'ikr,
Yeah,
tom
yeah, yeah.
ke'ikr,
You
would
still-
always go by,
you still would need the shear.
Mamashas gives us actually the standard of how much times we need to mevatel
Yes,
it.
that's correct. Yeah, and you would need to know how much, if it's possible, how much mamashas there was. I mean, ultimately, if you use a kafela, which the mechaber, it's helpful into figuring out if there's any tam still there, if there's any issa still there. In other words, that is of concern, right?
But it's interesting because
Right.
you mentioned that. It's interesting. The Mechaber used kafela.
Right.
He, so to say, instead of using tam ke'ikr, he's using mamashas ketam. If a taste is
Yeah.
detectable,
Right.
I have the problem with the
Or the
presence of
mamashas.
Yisr.
Right.
With the mamashas.
Exactly.
If I don't taste any taste,
Right.
then I don't care there's no
Yeah, but
mamashas.
the
If
Chaber-
it's not be'ein.
Machaber anyway is of the shita that tam cake is the raisa.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
here's
yeah.
the reverse.
Right.
If I don't have it be'ein, it's mamashas katam. Become tam ke'ikr. Ikr katam.
Right.
If there's tam, I have ikr there. I have
Yes,
a problem
in a
with
sense,
ikr.
in
If
a
there's
sense,
no tam, the
Yeah.
Kela says, I don't taste anything.
Right.
I know there's milk in there, but if he doesn't taste anything, it's as though there was no milk.
Right,
You said mamashas,
right.
and the word you used was feel. What the word you used before?
Yes.
You feel that it's there.
Right,
It's there.
right. You detect it. You know you taste it. I mean the goy
So when
tastes
that's not
it.
it,
Yeah.
with the feel, how do kefela or
A kefela, obviously, yeah.
or some other sense?
No, we have an iser here. We can't taste
I
it
know,
ourselves.
but
Yeah.
You,
Right.
you may be able to sense this or to taste.
That will be be'ein.
Yeah,
Smell.
if you
or
see it.
Something.
Right. If you
It
see
change
it.
the texture.
Right.
Even though it's completely melted and complete. it
Right.
may change the
Well, then
texture.
it's like Elon said. Then it may be considered a iser be'ain, where you can actually still see it. And then, without regard to the tam,
Is actually smelling it also a be'ein? Or is that not be'ein because it's you're doing with it?
smelling it is not the same as tam.
No, I'm talking about seeing. Seeing it.
Well, you know,
With respect
that's
to
the
it's making its presence known.
right.
What is the point of be'ein?
No.
Be'ein is I am able to identify it.
Remember that concerns reicha. The smell is a
Right.
different issue, and it's not the
That's
same.
when I only have reicha, when I
Right.
only have smell.
Well, obviously,
but
but
if the mashmashas is
Is it
there,
indicative that it's there?
if the mamashas is there, I can't see
Maybe
it
you're
now
smelling the
because they
vapors. Maybe you're only smelling the vapor. You're not really. You're not. It's not 100% certain that it's still there.
Uh-huh.
At the time, yeah. I wouldn't say so.
Okay.
Yeah, you would still have to investigate it. All right. So anyway, so just briefly, it's good to review. It's always good to review these sugyas. And you have some of the sugya in Avodah Zarah, you have it in Chulin, you have it in Psachim, depending on which tam keker we're talking about. So basically, you have some deis that hold a tam. The tam of an iser is keikar iser midoraisa. The tam is like the real thing. There's some that say that it's durabanan. Then, of course, you have machlokes as to where you learn it from. That's also the sugya discusses that, where did you learn it from? In other words, where do you take what you say to be, what's the raya to this from the Torah?
Well, is there anyone that disagrees the cloud that the tam is keikr? Because right now everyone agrees tam is keikr. The question is only is it the rabbanan or the raisa?
No, that's all it is. That's all the machlokes.
All the machlokes. No one says
Is it the
tam
raisa?
is
No. Is it the raisa or the rabbanan? Right. Okay, so we have Rashi. And this is the Rashi in Chulin. And he holds that the foundation or the sugya that discusses tam ki ikr is really a machlokes amoraim. In other words, it's not clear. We don't know from a particular source, a particular pasuk, whether it's this or that. It's really a machlokes amoraim. That's the way Rashi learns in Chulin. That it appears to him that it's a machlokes of the amoraim. If it's the Rais or the Rabbana. So according to Rava, this is all Rashi. According to Rava, tam ki ikr is of the Rabbana. And according to Abaya, it's the Raisa.
Which Rabba and Abaya are we talking about? In Chulin do we find that?
This is the Rashi in Chulin Kufches.
Yes.
Kufches, right. So he seems to infer, from that whole sugya that is discussed there, that it's an apparent machlokes amoraim to begin with, whether it's the Rais or the Rabbana. Right now, without regard to where does each one learn it from. Let's get to the maskana here. One says it's the Rabbanan, that's Rava. Abai says that it's a Raisa.
What is it matter?
No, right now, we did that in Taaruvot. In other words, in Taaruvot, I think we went into a little bit of what each one says, more in depth. Right now, I don't know if we need to go through the whole sugya of what...
It would be interesting what's the subject that is the positions.
Yeah, I'll get to that a little bit as to where each one says what. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, there appears to be a stira. Rabbi Yochanan in Psachim, Memdalet says, or it's mashma from what he says, that it's a deraisa. And in the Sugya of Avodah Zarah, it appears that he says that it's a derabanan. So Rashi says, don't think that Rabbi Yochanan, there's a stira. Rashi says that in Psachim, all it is an asmachta. In other words, that the pasuk that is being mentioned over there is only an asmachta. If you don't know exactly what asmachta means, in other words, we can relate it. We can back it up we have something similar to this mentioned in the Torah that apparently correlates.
It supports.
It supports. Yeah, that's what the word asmachta means. It supports this particular din. So it doesn't mean that it's a beferish raya from that this is a pasuk from the Torah that says it's also, but it's an asmachta according to Rabbi Elyahu Kin in Psachim.
So in other words, according to Rashi, so what is it? Doesn't establish the Isser.
The Midoraisa, right?
There is support.
There is support for that position. Yeah.
That it's also going to have a rabbinic.
Exactly. But in general, Rashi says, we find the Kol Torah Kula, based on what Rabbi Elyahu Kin says, that Tam Ke'ikar is the Rabbana, and that's how Rashi really holds. It was his sheet that Rashi holds that Lemaisa the Maskana, according to him, Tam Ke'ikar is the Rabbana.
And Rabbi and Abaya were dispute ones.
No, they were on their own. They were on their own. Separate story. Now, before we go on to Toises and the various other sheets in Toises, there are, however, several instances where, according to everyone, Tam Ke'ikar would be a deraisa. Okay, and that's important to keep in mind. And that's because of beferish psukim in those particular instances. In other words, we still have the machloikes in principle, but because we have beferish psukim about those instances, then we know that is a case where the Torah says it's a deraisa. One of them is Basar בחלב. Okay, that the combination of the two is a situation where it's also in the Torah.
What the combination of
right, the tam involving the tam even.
But the tam,
yeah,
where does
the
Torah say that?
Cholov. Right, you don't have to have necessarily the actual ba'in. We learn over there that the presence of cholov in basar creates a problem of chanan, now which is a separate problem, but the absorption of the cholov into the basar is a deraisa din. It's not a derabanan. It's not a smachta.
I don't understand.
Yeah. Sure.
Deoraisa, if I have a nice steak,
right,
and I have a piece of on top of it.
Yeah, but we're not talking about
wait.
Yeah.
And I eat the two together.
Right.
I would have a taste of basar and challah.
No. That's not what we're talking about.
Wait. I would have a taste of basar and challah.
No.
I'd be tasting milk and meat.
No. That's not what.
Excuse me. Let me finish the sentence.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. Go ahead.
Just one sentence.
Sure.
Since I happen to know what I'm about to ask.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me ask it.
Yeah.
So I would have a taste of basar b'chalav.
Right.
But that taste of milk and meat is not forbidden d'oraisa.
No.
So what is forbidden d'oraisa is the taste of something that through cooking is a combination of meat and milk.
Correct. Yes.
If the two combined together.
That's right.
The taste of that combined thing is forbidden.
It's forbidden through bishul.
Okay.
Right.
Very good. Now, where in the Torah does it say that isser on the taste of that combined? I know that the Torah asks cooking the two together, and the Torah asks eating if they were cooked together, and I know the Torah asks having a benefit if they were cooked together. What does the Torah ask the taste as a separate item?
It's not a separate item. That's the isser of basar b'cholav that we learn. That it's not necessarily the cholav itself being cooked with the basar, which is one isser. That's the isser of bishul. Okay. And then, like you said, the isser, once you have cooked the two together, right?
Yes.
Even though the cholav is no longer present, what you have in the basar is the tam cholav that was cooked with the basar. That's also in the Torah.
To eat.
Yeah, that's
And
partial.
have hana.
That's partial. Yeah, we learned
But
that in the beginning
does
of
the
the
Torah
cholav.
formulate separately from that an isser on the taste of it?
No, it just
But
happens to be that is an example.
If your hana,
Right, it's not an.
include taste.
What is that?
He wants-
Isser hana
Right.
will include taste.
The isser hano will not.
Will include tasting it.
He wants to derive the isser of taste from hana.
Yeah, but the isser hano is a separate isser.
Right.
Right.
But it will include tasting the item.
No.
Any benefit.
But hana, he says, is a told of a taste is a told of hana.
No.
Since Torah asers hana,
Yeah.
so included in that would also then be the tasting that.
No, that's something else. It's a separate isser. Right, we learned lotevashal. There's 3 isurim, right? The achila, the bishul, and the hano.
That's what I'm asking you is.
So here's achila. It's just the achila part, without becoming too involved with the ordinary machloikis that we have here of tam ke'ikar. It's just that the way this issue presents itself through the psukim, of course, is that tam in this situation is also midoraisa. That's all.
I have a big problem with that.
Okay.
Because whenever I'm talking about a tam that I'm not allowed whenever I'm talking about tam ke'ikar, right?
Right.
There's always an isser involved.
How?
And eating, when I'm talking about tam ke'ikar, I'm not talking about eating something that's permitted. Tam ke'ikar means that the forbidden substance is present through its taste. And
Okay, right, but we have a
but there is
machloikis.
but wait a second, but there's
Right.
always some forbidden substance involved.
Right.
So if you're saying that the tam ke'ikar with respect to basar b'chalav is immediately identical to the isser of eating basar that was cooked with chalav,
Right.
then the prohibition of eating crocodile meat or pork
Right.
should be just as clearly, obviously inclusive of tam ke'ikar with respect to crocodile meat.
Yeah, but that's what the machloikis is all about.
So then the mechalek should also be b'basar b'chalav.
But there isn't.
Well, why not?
Nobody argues on that.
That might be so, but that might
Yeah.
but
No, but everybody says that from the pasuk that
Which
prohibits
pasuk says that?
the lotevashel, that we cannot have the two combined together. It is inferred that includes the bishul, the achilo, and the hano. And what's the achila over here? What's the issue of the achila over here? Like you said before, through the method of bishul, it's not the issue of eating meat with cheese, which we don't do either midrabanan. It's the issue of eating meat that was cooked in milk, but there's no milk anymore. No, that's not the issue if there's milk anymore or not. It's that this meat has absorbed the flavor of the milk that it was cooked with.
But l'chayra, you always
Right,
say
that's
there's
all.
no
That's
milk
all.
anymore.
Right.
But l'chayra,
Yeah.
there's just as much or just as little meat remaining as meat that was cooked in a soup made from crocodile meat.
Right.
So then there is just as little.
But
and
that's
I'm not allowed to eat that meat
but that's a different din. That's a different
How-
din. It's
how's
not a
it different?
basar b'chalav mixture. It's a problem of nevela. It's a problem of nevela. Do I have a problem with the tam of a nevela?
I didn't understand. I'm talking about crocodile.
Yeah, nevela.
Navila, crocodiles.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's call it correctly. Behemoth meya, chayat meya. Right. Okay, yeah.
No, because a nevela could also be a cow, and there would have the
Yeah, no, I use
that
nevela
animal.
because of the sugya, the Gemara talking about what we do with the nevela. We give it to the ger. We give it to the goy. Yeah. So anyway, all right. So I related that to that.
That's why I'm
But in
specifically using
ochiname, any one of those,
I'm assuming crocodile has a very distinct taste.
yeah, but it makes no
A
difference.
piece of meat was cooked
Right.
in a pot with a little
Yeah.
crocodile meat.
Yeah.
The
That's
kosher meat was removed.
That's what the machloikis is all about.
No, but my question is,
Yeah.
why is that, with respect to tam ke'ikar, any better than meat that was cooked in milk and was removed?
Because that sugya, the problem or the machloikis is concerning the tam of an isser. Does the status of the tam remain like the isser? Does it have the same power or not? That's the question. By basar b'chalav, there is no question because the whole isser is the combination of the two. So I would venture to say that they're not exactly the same. Because, in other words, if I have the question there, why don't I have it here too? Right.
Or if I don't have the question here, why do I have it there?
But nevertheless, that's the way the poskim explain it. That over there, at least, I don't have the question. I'm presenting it in this way that there is a full agreement on tam ke'ikar there. Not that it's a tam ke'ikar by basar b'chalav. It's a very unique situation because the pasuk, and you find this in the Gemara, by the way, too. Whenever there is disagreements or disputes, one may say to the other, "Oh, you can't prove this to me from here. This is a chidush," and the Gemara says that. L'maisa, you're right. Basar b'chalav is a chidush. So what I'm doing is I'm not actually extending the tam ke'ikar to include basar b'chalav. I'm only using it for purposes of seeing how that situation is unique, is different. But you are right. If you really want to get to the bottom of this, the Gemara itself says it's a chidush.
Basar b'chalav
It's
is
a
a
chidush.
chidush because you have to do things that are
Right.
permitted, that are cooked
Exactly.
together.
So therefore you can't bring a raya from that even. So perhaps
maybe I can or I can't bring a raya from that. That's
Yeah.
not my problem. But what does that have to do with whether
No.
the presence of the taste is has the same power of prohibiting something
Right.
as the substance itself, whether this
It doesn't.
is the
It doesn't.
Rabbanan or the
It doesn't. I only presented it as such.
Oh.
It's a chiddush. Basar b'chalav, I should not compare it, but they are lumped together. There's a few isurim that are lumped together for purposes of demonstrating that even though tam ke'ikr is a general, there's a machlokes about them when it comes to the flavor, these other areas or instances where flavor is involved are unique, are exceptions to the rule, because there is a pasuk beferish that answers those instances.
And I was looking for that pasuk.
Lot of Ashel by Basar b'chalav. That's all. There's no other pasuk. Do you know of any other pasuk?
Why does Lot of Ashel constitute the Isser of Tam
It doesn't.
Ke'ikr as a Deoraisa?
It doesn't. It only constitutes
Well,
the
do we have
Isser.
pasukim in the
It doesn't. It's a chidush that the combination of the two, where one has absorbed the other through the tam, and it's not actual cheese melted inside the meat, it's just the tam. It's also
Who says it's just
because that's all you have. If you have meat that absorbed milk through bishul, that is a piece of basar b'chalav.
That's a new
Okay,
hefzer.
fine.
That is the result of the combination of the two.
Fine.
But that doesn't mean necessarily that it's an isser on the top, ke'ikr, but as a
No,
deraisa.
you're right. You're right, but
But do we have such a pasuk in the Torah where it ushers something other than basar b'chalav, where you have actually a pasuk that says the taste of this is forbidden?
no,
Not
there
basar
isn't.
b'chalav,
No, there
something
isn't.
else.
No, there isn't.
There is no place where the Torah ushers expressly the taste of something.
Well, that's the machlokes in the
So,
sugya.
I'm
If you
talking
go,
about
if we were,
an isolated case that you were
no, no,
quoting. there
yeah,
was
each
psukim.
one has psukim.
Which is each one? Who is each one?
Basar b'chalav right now. Our first example was basar b'chalav, and we learned that. We already
Do we
covered
have
that.
other examples?
Yeah, I'm getting there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the first example of a unique situation where the tam is nevertheless a problem min Torah. I mean, it's a tam. However you look at it, is basar b'chalav. Yes, it's a chidush. Yes, it's different, and that's why it's
Why
an
do you say
exception.
it's a tam?
Because the tam is what makes it usher there.
No, the presence of the milk inside the meat. That's
There's
why we
no-
have hanan.
There's no more presence of any milk in there.
Sure
All
there
there is flavor.
No.
Yes. Sure. All there is the flavor.
No.
I tasted it, yeah.
No,
Yeah, yeah.
but excuse me.
Yeah.
The general case of
Yeah.
cooking meat in some liquid, whether
Right.
it's milk or broth or
Right.
whatever, is that subsequently I have an Isser Balua.
Yes.
Isser Balua.
Right. The tam is also an Isur Balua. Yeah.
Tom, I don't know about that, but
Yeah,
let's assume that Tom is a case of Isser Balua. It doesn't mean that when I've cooked the meat with milk together, in the meat I don't have an Isser Balua.
Yes, I understand
It doesn't
that.
exclude
Yeah.
that, even
Yeah.
if Tom is one
Yeah.
type of Isser Balua.
But nevertheless, that's what the halacha is, that if you detect a taste in the piece of meat,
and we're trying
forget
to determine, is that the Oraisa or the Rabbanan?
it's a daraisa. The poshet, without explaining why this is different than
We
everything
paskin
else.
like that
That's how we
everywhere.
paskin. Why?
Paskin
Because
everywhere
it's a beferish pasuk.
What's
Yeah.
the first pasuk that ushers the taste?
It answers the combination of the two.
But that could still be Isser Balua.
I'm explaining it.
Yeah.
I'm explaining it that way, and others do as well. When we learn the sugya, that basar b'chalav is a similar situation to tam ke'ikr elsewhere. It's at least similar, right? Nonetheless, it's also min Torah. That's all. It doesn't pay for us to get too much more into it. The fact, no. The fact is, it's similar. It is. It has absorbed the tam of chalav. That's it. And it's going to be also in the rice because the pasuk says so. That's all. Nothing else.
Maybe if we make it one more try, maybe I'll
Right.
understand it.
All right.
I can either say, I don't know if Tom Keir is the Oraisa or not.
Okay.
Now I can say, if meat absorbed real milk, and now I have milk in that meat, if I squeeze that meat well,
Right.
milk will be dripping out.
Okay.
Then I have milk which was cooked with meat.
Right,
That
that's
milk is hanan.
Yeah.
That milk is an isser.
That's
It's now
be'ena.
in the meat.
Right.
Well, it's in the meat now. It's
Sure.
it's absorbed within it.
Right.
So I have here something that I'm not allowed to eat because it's basar because it's an isser now.
Right.
Material.
All right.
It's not a taste. Now, if all that meat collected was the taste of milk, we said it was cooked in a milky pot, let's say,
Right.
where there were blias of milk in the
Right.
in the walls
Sure,
of the pot,
sure.
but there was no real milk around.
Right.
So now the meat was cooked in a milky pot.
Right.
I could say so. Now all it has is an absorption of taste.
All right.
Maybe the Torah didn't
It
answer
did,
that,
but it still
Why
does.
Why did it answer that?
That's what we learned that already, right? That the tam of the cholov entering the meat is what brings about the
When
isra
did
of the
we
two.
learn that?
From the pasuk lo tevashak di b'chalev imoi.
Bechaleb,
Which is
not
the
betam chalev.
no, but which is the chiddush? It's the chiddush. The chiddush is the basar b'chalav. It's the combination of the two.
Of the meat and the milk.
Right.
But that
The milk doesn't
tell me
the
anything
milk
about the
doesn't
taste.
have to be there anymore. The milk doesn't have to be there.
Where does it say that? That's what I said.
Yeah,
Once I say tam ke'ikr.
that's what we learned. That's what we already learned before. It has nothing to do with tam
When did
ke'ikr.
we learn that?
Yeah, in the very, very beginning, that it's the combination of the two having entered, having penetrated each other through bishul,
But that's the
even
real
if you have
stuff.
nothing left in there.
That's the
all
real
you
stuff.
all you have is the tam.
Who says that?
That's what we did. That's
Where
what we
does
covered
it
before.
say? Where does the Torah expressly state
no,
that?
no, the Torah does not expressly state that. You have a lot of Torah Shabbal Peh.
Ah.
Torah doesn't expressly say every little
Well,
thing.
who claims that there is a Torah Shalpeh that says that?
No, that's the whole sugi of Basar B'chalav in the Gemara. That's the whole
No.
Gemara. Yeah.
Where in the Gemara? Give me
okay.
somewhere in the Gemara a place where
Yeah.
someone makes such a claim.
Yeah.
I went twice through the Daf Yomi.
Yeah.
I don't recall such a place. Do
Yeah,
you?
yeah. That's the whole sugya of Basar B'chalav, which Gemara says it's a chidush. You're right. It's not exactly like the tam ke'ikr. It's the fact that there was basar that was cooked with milk, even though the milk is no longer there. It has nothing to do with milk being there now. It was cooked. This basar was cooked with milk. It was cooked.
Right.
It became an iser. It became an avela. It became forbidden. That's all. Forget about the tam. Yes, no tam. Well, obviously, we want to see if there is tam just to determine quantity-wise. Perhaps it was only a tipa. That's when we have to detect if the tam is still there. But if we assume, because of the quantity, we don't even have to taste it, that it's probably detectable, then it's going to be asur. All right? But anyway, we're not getting really anywhere. It's a chidush. Basar b'chalav is a chidush, the fact that they were cooked together. And this resembles the case of tam ke'ikr, because that's what is happening. In other words, the isser is no longer there. The tam is there. A representative of the isser is there. Some representative, a little bit of mamashas if you want to. It's not real mamashas, it's only tam. It's there. Does that mean that the isser is there or not? By chalav, it is.
Just
Yeah,
said.
right.
That you said. I'm not sure
Yeah,
whether
sure.
this is what you mean.
Yeah.
Do you mean that since, when objectively speaking, I know with certainty with milk,
Right.
but if a kfela tastes that meat and tells me, I don't take milk,
Right.
I can then go ahead and eat it, right? According to the Mechaber.
Yes.
So then the only offending aspect of the meat having been cooked with milk would be if the milk was tasteable.
Yes. That's all.
So absent of the taste, it's as though the mamashes of the milk wasn't even there.
Wasn't even present.
Even though there might be mamashes of milk absorbed in that meat.
Molecular.
Not molecular. Why molecular? That's the whole point of Hanan.
Okay, I mean, not
Hanan
molecular.
is not a question of
Okay,
zliya.
I would say molecular, but a little bit that is not substantial enough. Remember, in Torah, there's always
In terms of taste, it's not substantial.
in terms of isurim and taste, there's always going to be something of a quantitative one. There's going to be a kamut. In other words, is this substantial or not? The Torah does not answer small little levels of presence of chalav in basar or small levels of isur present.
I take it back.
Yeah.
What I was trying to say in a sense. Because that,
Yeah.
because you were talking about kamut,
Right.
that with a kfela and tasting and so on goes on whether there was a successful bittul of the isur.
Yes. Okay.
That doesn't go on whether the isur is whether there was. Let me ask you like this: if
All
a
right.
kfela tastes the meat that was cooked up,
Okay.
doesn't taste any milk,
Sure.
was the cooking an isur or not?
The cooking is always an isur.
Even if the kfela doesn't.
That's right. That's correct.
Then I rest my
Independent.
case.
Independent of that.
Then
Sure.
I rest my case.
Sure. You're not allowed to. Yeah.
So and that doesn't depend on the taste.
Why?
That doesn't depend.
No, it doesn't. No, it's a separate isur. Yeah. All right. The other example was mishras yain by Nazir.
So, but you're saying that tam ki'ikr by basar b'chalav means that even if I cook milk pot that has the blia, I'm over on the isser of.
Yes.
Even though there's no real milk there, there's the taste of milk.
Yeah, the only thing is, remember, when you're cooking, there could be a nat bar nat situation where you may not be really over on the real isser of basar.
In the case of nat bar nat, that would apply to the taste as well. The eating it as well.
At some point,
Nat bar nat,
because nat bar nat is right, exactly.
Aside the nat bar nat, you're saying the isser of cooking meat and milk in a pot even applies if what's in the pot is the taste of milk in the walls of the pot and no mamashas of milk.
Right, because let's say you don't have any liquid whatsoever, right? That's the case of the Gemara of Ola. Remember the case of Ola? You cooked or you fried fish in a pot without any liquid whatsoever, or in a frying pan. It's called Ola. It came up. In other words, it was just no liquid was involved, so you don't have the nat bar nat. You have the tam going directly from the walls of the gdera to the fish, or in this case to the meat.
Yes.
It would be different than if there was liquid presence in the pot.
I don't understand how that helps us. We're talking about the isser of cooking.
No. So that would be an isser of cooking, whether it's you're cooking.
And we said the isser of cooking does not depend on the taste.
Right.
Okay, so the absence of doesn't.
The taste, a matter of taste, is a question of whether I detect it or not. In the quantity that I have. Just because I'm able to cook something and not to detect it, does not mean that I'm allowed to cook it. Just because
the only one time we have anything would be basar b'chalav. Do we have other isurim of cooking?
No, right. So I'm saying it. So there are two separate isurim. One says I cannot cook regardless of the amount. In other words, a basar that corresponds to the chalav. In other words, it's mevatel and I still cannot cook it. And one would be a b'diavad, of course, always. If I can eat now this basar that was cooked by mistake with the challah, well, that would be a question of bitul, which is really a question of detection.
But for me, the interesting question, which I haven't discussed.
Yeah.
For me, the interesting question is when it comes to cooking in a milk pot, even though there is no milk in that pot, there's only the taste of milk, some taste of milk. In the walls of the pot remaining, that's a yomo.
It's still
that's the violation of the isser of cooking meat and milk.
That still is a violation, right? And I'll show it to you inside. I think we went over it. Maybe we didn't spend enough time on that, but we went over it. Regardless of how you do it, the only time that is the only examples of where you don't really have an issue with the rice is kavush, right? Even though it's like mevu, because you don't really have the bishul.
Right.
But if you have the real bishul, then that, of course, would be a problem. But anyway, let's leave that for another time. We'll look into it again later on. We have other examples in the Gemara of that are exceptions. One is Mishras Yain by a Nazir who cannot have any form of wine, even that which is soaked in wine. We have the case of Kli.
But excuse me, that just to summarize what we just discussed. If indeed we have an isser of cooking meat in a milky pot, that's ben yomo, even there is no substance in that pot,
right.
We have the isser of cooking in that pot,
right.
So that would clearly say that tam ke'ikr by milk is doraisa.
Yeah.
That would imply it.
That would be an exception, right?
Because if tam ke'ikr is not doraisa, then why do I have an isser of cooking in the pot that's milk?
Right, exactly. Very good. Yeah, you could say that. Yeah, but we'll look into it. We'll look inside to see if there's anything more, perhaps, to that. Mm-hmm. From what I recall, that would be so. In other words, that even cooking without water, especially without water, would be a problem. All right, but real quickly, Mishras Yain with Nazir is another example where we have a Beferish Pasuk. Nazir, a Nazir has to stay away from any wine, raisins, and things that are, that come from wine. So the same would apply to that which was soaked, which has the tam of the wine, even though it's not the wine in itself. There is Klein Midyon, which is the Geulei Akum, which is the kelim that were taken. Jews took possession of kelim of the Goyim. They require Hagala or Libun. So there is an example of tam, of the kelim, Bnei Yoman, assuming that they're Bnei Yoman, that you cannot cook in them. Even though you're not cooking with nevela or with behemoth tmeya meat, it's an exception. That tam in the kelim is also beferish pasuk that over there you can't use them.
Are you talking about the kelim?
It's also to cook.
The caught from the
goyim. Right. So you cannot, unless you do agala or liban, if that's possible, you cannot lechatchila bnei yoman cook fry, roast, or whatever in such keilim because of the tam abalua in them. So, tam keikar, no, this is an exception. The Torah gave a pasuk for that alone. And the Gemara says also, this is an exception, it's different. And we will see how this makes a difference soon in a moment with one of the shitas in Toises. But that's a beferisha pasuk on that. Then we have kotchim that we discussed before with korbanos that were cooked in a pot. Yeah, exactly. So these are basic only 4. I don't think there's any more. These are the 4 that I found that are exceptions. What's interesting is that Rabbeinu Tam there says that there is no machlokes amoraim. Yeah. He basically says clearly, Tam ki ikis d'oraisa.
He says that on Rashi.
Yeah, no, he says, but wait a minute, Rabbeinu Tam, they're discussing it in the Gemara. What do you mean there's no machlokes? He says, yeah, that discussion in the Gemara amongst the Amoraim is only, where do we learn it from? With Tam Ke'ikr is D'oraisa. It's not a question of whether it's D'oraisa or D'Rabbanan. They're actually having a whole big discussion there. He says, no, there's no machlokes between them if it's D'oraisa or D'Rabbanan. He holds it's D'oraisa. It's just that their whole discussion is, where do you know this from? Which pasuk? No, this is an exception. In other words, that's what they're arguing about. But it's not. He says that everybody holds it's a D'oraisa. It's interesting.
I just can't agree with you.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the machlokes there in the Gemara between Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. As far as, okay, so what do we hold? So Rashi says, wait a minute, we're going to hold Tam Keikah D'Rabbanan. It's a machlokes Amoraim to begin with, and then we pass, and it's the Rabban. Rabbeinu Tam is going to hold Tam Keikah D'Oraisa. Now, what's interesting is, and we discussed it before in Hilchos Taaruvot, very, very interesting that Tosfos brings down a few more shitas. Tosfos brings down the shita of Rabbi Yosef Me'orlains, if you remember that. He holds true. Tam Keikah is Midoraisa, but ein loikin olav. If you remember that, you don't get marcus for it. Because if you hold Tam Keikah is like a deraisa, then why not get marcus for it? No. He says something very interesting. Afilo shelo b'minoi. In other words, even if it's shelo b'minoi, you don't get marcus on it. Why? So he brings down like this. Rabbi Yochanan, who discusses this, holds like Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Akiva is the one that holds that we learn it out from Geulei Avodah Zarah, from those kelim. And therefore, since our whole raya comes from there, over there is an assay. There's a mitzvah assay. Remember the mitzvah assay by the kelim? What is that? Ta'aviru ba'esh. That all those kelim that you buy from a goy that were used, you got to make a gola or liban to it. On an assay, you don't get malchus. In other words, if that whole raya, Rabbi Yochanan holds like Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says that the whole raya to this is from Geulei Avodah Zarah, from those kelim. If that's the case, over there it's a mitzvah saseh, it's not a lois saseh. It's very interesting. Yeah, if you learn like that the whole raya is from there, over there it's an assay. If it's an assay, you don't get marcus on it. So it's still the raisa.
Yeah, so in other words, if you cook if they were to cook in those kelim without doing Geula, they would be mevatel a mitzvah saseh, but they wouldn't be in violation of a mitzvah nada.
Exactly.
They would still be allowed to eat it.
Right. You still cannot eat it.
No, they would be allowed to eat it. They would just mevatel a mitzvah saseh.
No, you can't eat it.
How? What's stopping you? What's stopping you? You can't say it's a mitzvah saseh.
No.
That's stopping you from eating
it. It's also to eat it.
So what's ushering it? You just said
there
was only a mitzvah saseh.
You're committing an isser.
What an isser?
Yeah.
What's the isser here? If all it was a mitzvah saseh, there is no isser. According to this,
right.
The whole point where we learned it from was that it was a mitzvah saseh that you're supposed to do hagala or liban.
No. Yeah, that's on the kelim. We're still talking about the isser of Tam Keikah, remember?
Well, excuse me, wait a second. We just said the Tam Keikah isser it's based on that.
It's based on that.
And if it's based on that, then I have no other Tam Keikah isser besides the one based on that.
Yeah, but why does the Torah not...
And it's a mitzvah saseh, and therefore there's no like.
No, but why? Right, but why does the Torah not ask you to begin with to cook in that?
If you want to quote that, then then I have a mitzvah lo ta'aseh.
No. Yeah. Well, that's what he says. In other words, we see that there is a problem there. He says we see that what's the problem? It's the tam.
But why aren't they like him enough on the mitzvahs not ta'aseh?
That I don't know. But
he must hold there is no mitzvah lotase.
No, he does say that there's no lois asay, but he still says it's also because of the asay. We find other situations.
It would be mevatel mitzvah asay. That's all.
No, but it would be also for you to eat it.
No. Maybe it's a lot asay that's not took what it's called to it asay.
No, not really.
Since you have a remedy on the loy asay, which is to do hagala,
right.
Such a loy asay there is no malkin lala.
Yeah, but he didn't say it that way. I understand what you're saying, but he didn't say it. All he said is the reason why we're not like it is because all there is an isser of violation is of the asay. But it's still usher to eat it. And I don't remember if this was
Why would they also to eat it?
Yeah, because you're over on what the Torah tells you to do.
But an asay doesn't stop you from eating it.
No, it doesn't make a difference. There are many situations in the Torah that you're not necessarily over on the you're over on asay, right? For doing something. In other words, it does not. I understand what you're saying. Why shouldn't I be able to eat it? You're not only over on the asay for not doing the hagala. As a result of this asay, you cannot eat it either.
What about a nas?
No, it's like a knas, exactly.
But if it's a knas, it's not a mitzvah asay.
Right, then it would not be a lois asay, right? But you're over on asay. You cannot benefit from it.
So we would have to have a source to say that.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But anyway, yeah. So that's what he said. That's his shita. That there's no malchus, but it's still an isur d'oraisa. Now, then there's a sheet, and this is a very interesting one.
So it is an isur.
It is an isur d'oraisa. Yeah. No, it's tam ki'ikum d'oraisa, according to him. Tam ki'ikum d'oraisa, right? Anyway, this fourth shita, which is a very interesting one, we spoke a lot about it, is the shita of Rabbi Elyahu. That's the one I think in the Toyses and the Zohar, that he distinguishes like this: Tamoy velo mamoshoy. Tamoy velo mamoshoy is an example of kazayis she'em bo kedei achilas pras. That's what he says. In other words, tamoy velo mamoshoy is like a kazayis. In other words, there's no kazayis b'kedei achilas pras, and therefore there's no malchus on it. Tamoy and mamoshoy, which you get malchus on, we're talking about kazayis b'chdei achilas pras. Now, this is also the shita of Rabbeinu Chaim, and I'm almost sure it's also the shita, I recall, of Tosfos somewhere else in Chulin. Now, what's interesting about this shita is like this, and we discussed it in Taaruvot. When we spoke about what's kedei achilas pras, we mentioned achilas pras as a concept of time. Whether it's 4 minutes you hold, or 5 or 9, makes no difference right now. As the time it takes me to eat a pras, a half a loaf.
Right.
Okay? Mm-hmm. So in other words, why is that significant, that shear? Because you can eat a kazayis in bits and pieces, right? And you can eat it over an hour's time. Are you going to be over? No. Pretty much everybody holds that for a kazayis, for a person to be over on eating a kazayis of something that is usher, it has to be eaten within a achilas pras. That's what we hold. I mean, pretty much. That's how we hold. That it needs to be eaten. Otherwise, you haven't eaten the right shear.
But chatzi shiur achzar.
Right.
So the isur is still there. You just don't get.
Yeah, you just exactly. Thank you. The isur is still there, but you don't get punished for it. Very good. So for the most part, that's how we hold. Here we're presented with an additional concept in b'chdei achilas pras. You know what it means, tama umamoshay, where you get malchus and where it's a problem, when the amount of food you have. Forget about the time now. The amount of food you have a kazayis of that isser b'chdei achilas pras. In other words,
what is he trying to mean?
Okay, you have a kazayis of the isser within
the time frame.
No, not time. Forget about time frame right now. B'chdei achilas pras, in other words, within a bowl of food that contains an achilas pras. Now, what does that mean? Even if I were not to eat the entire kazayis, this sheet is telling me I don't need to eat the entire kazayis. Even if I eat a kazayis of this mixture, which is a kazayis within an achilas pras amount of food, I would be over on it. It has forget about time right now. I ate it in 2 minutes. I ate it in 30 seconds. But I ate a kazayis of this food. In other words, what this kazayis has done, it has transformed the whole achilas pras food into an isser. That's a chidush. That's not the regular chidush or the regular concept of achilas pras.
What he's saying is, but it has to be a kazayis.
Yes.
So if I have a kazais against the quantity of nachilas pras,
Right.
that proportion of isser against something that's permitted, aser is the permitted,
Yes.
and then if I eat a kazais of that
Permitted.
combination of isser, then I'm over, even if
over.
I didn't eat a kazais of the isser that aser to the permitted
Right.
Taaruvot.
Right. Exactly.
How does, you didn't learn before.
No. In other words, in his interpretation of when tam makes a difference, right? Here we're talking about tam keikar. So he says not for the tam to be keikar, it would have to be in this kind of a situation where I have a kazais of the iser b'chdei achilas pras. In other words, that's the way he interprets tam keikar. That's what he says it would be also min Torah. Tam by itself, no, that's not a problem. Not min Torah. In other words, so this sheet is basically telling us, forget about tam, the word tam by itself. When do you have a problem? You have a problem if you have that much of an iser, or kazais, in a chidei achilas pras. Even though I'm not eating the whole kazais of the iser, I'm eating a kazais of this mixture.
But since I'm noticing the tam, the taste of the isser within the kazais of what I'm eating,
that's pshat. That's pshat. What you're saying is very good. You're basically clarifying the whole thing. The reason this is so is because it is identifiable. It is very much detected. When you have a kazais within this amount of food, it is as though it's the mamashus is there. So even though I'm not eating a kazais of the entire isser, which everybody holds is usher within the time frame
of the actual
isser. Here I'm not eating a kazais of the actual isser, but it's within a chilas pras amount of food. It transforms the whole food into a piece of isser. Okay, very interesting concept in a chilas pras.
But if I would have only the taste present without any of the mamashes,
no problem. Would be not a problem with the rice.
And I wouldn't have a problem with the rice.
Right. This is how the Tur paskins. As far as the Rambam, it's very interesting. There's different opinions as how the Rambam holds. Some say he holds it's tam kinkers the rice, some say he holds it's the Rabbanan, some say he holds like Rabbeinu Chaim, except for the, I think that he holds that you would need to eat a whole Isser, or a whole Kazayis. Anyway, different opinions as to how the Rambam holds. The Mechaber and Ramo we saw in Tzadik Ches, in Taaruvot, they hold tam kinkers the rice. Most of the, I think, Achorim also hold like that. That's how we pass it. Okay, real quickly. I don't want to spend too much more time on this. I just wanted to use this as a hakdama, an introduction to Tzadik. Okay, Noisen Tam Lev Gam. Also from Gemara in Avodah Zarah. Lemaskana, we say Noisen Tam Lev Gam Mutar. A taste which is Aser, which is Pogum, or a taste of Isser that will make the Tafshil Pogum, is Mutar. When we say mutter, it doesn't mean it's lechatchila. We say b'diavad, of course, right? That's what we mean. Really, we should say potur. Yeah, but that's how we hold. Noisen tam lev gam is mutter, meaning that it doesn't present a problem. Okay, in other words, b'diavad. So that's both. Either, well, actually, it's a machlokes. What is something pogum? What does it mean? Is pogum does that have to be not roy le'achila at all? Or it's a little bit poigim the tavshil. Is that sufficient? So we learned in Taaruvot. The Mechaber basically points out it doesn't have to be in Kuf Gimel. Remember, he said, "Kol davar shetama pogum eno iser Taaruvot. V'afilo ein tam pogum machmas atzmoi." By itself, it's okay. Shebitnei atzmo muto mishum achelo shepoigim Taaruvot. It's mutar. And then he says it doesn't have to be sheyivgum legamre actually cuts le'achro. It doesn't have to be totally not tasty.
That's it's detrimental for taste.
Right.
Like, for instance, sugar and gefilte, which I consider very
Yeah. Anyway.
The more sugar, the more detrimental.
How do we know nifgam ktsas is sufficient, according to the majority of poskim? Because we learn it out from kedero she'eno bas yoima. Gemara says, when do we aser kedero of goyim? When it's a bas yoima. But if it's an ena bas yoima, b'di'evet, it's okay. By the way, why can't you lechatchila use a gedero she'eno ben bas yoima? It's a gzeira otu ben yoima. You may make a mistake and use the kenan that we use on that day. But otherwise, what do we see? That a gedero she'eno bas yoima is also pagum. And that's a very, very small kind of pegima. It's not so much. And if that's mutter, b'diavad, then we see that the pegima does not have to be a very, very, detestable taste, that you cannot take it at all, even if it's a little bit.
So it's a miracle that you can do Hagala. Davar sheish lo matir.
Why is it davar sheish lo matir?
Because you just have to wait a few more hours.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but lechatchila we don't do that. Yeah.
Exactly, that's why we live.
Right,
that's
right.
why we do the Hagala on an Eino Binyo.
Yeah.
Right? Is that
Yeah.
right?
The what?
The prescribed way to do it is to do Hagala on something that's an Eino Binyo.
Right. We wait.
Is that because of the Hashash of Davar sheish lo matir? It's not.
No, it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the Isser coming out again.
So why don't we say Davar sheish lo
No. We don't want to make Hagolah on the same day when it's been,
Right.
Because of the time coming out into the water.
I understand.
Right.
It will be a fresh
Nevela
taste.
is fresh, right.
There are opinions that it
That's
doesn't
all.
get rid
Right.
of.
So
Right.
whatever is easier is better, to make it. So you wait a day, it's already pogrom anyway. Anyway, the Rashba has a good question. He says, why is it that we're makel in a tam pogrom from the Gdera, for example, but we're not as makel with a nevela? The nevela itself, it has to be completely not roy lachila. In other words, in order for you to eat something treif, it has to be completely unedible.
Even like this kid, a human being.
Yeah, well, at least to a human being. I mean,
That
yeah, no. If it's totally not, in other words, completely nisrach, as it's called, And this is a question by medication, of course. It has to be completely unedible for human consumption. And here we're being makel with the tam on the kedera that it doesn't have to be very, very pogo, just a little bit. So he says by nevela, to begin with, you have an isser. It's already usher from the very start. Something that is usher from the very start, it has to be completely not edible. By tam, it only becomes pogum later on. Okay? It only becomes pogum after 24 hours. It was not necessarily, we're talking about especially basar and cholov, okay? It was not an iser in the very beginning. It was, in the case of basar v'cholov, for example, it was a heter. All right? By basar v'cholov especially, in the case of basar v'cholov, when they first were absorbed, they were heter. They were not iser. You have additional leniencies by basar v'cholov, and we'll get to that. I don't know if we'll make it. You have additional leniencies by basar v'cholov, especially according to the Bala Itur. We'll see that each one is a heter. When they're not mixed, they're heter. They're not iser to begin with. All right, but let's go back to nevela. But by nevela, what's the difference between the real nevela and the tam? So he says that by nevela, a real nevela, it's asur, that iser is there from the very beginning. Let me see here. And by tam of the keli, when is there a problem? The problem only occurs when you are cooking in the food, the heter food in the pot. When you're cooking the food in the pot, the heter food in the pot, by that time, the nevela tam is only then making this food asur. At that time that it's making the food asur, it's already pogum. So you see the difference? By nevela, let's forget about basar b'cholov. I just gave you that. Put it aside. It's a whole different example. But in the case of nevela, the nevela was also to begin with at the very start. It was a piece of nevela, so it's also you need it to be completely unedible. By time coming from the kelim, you have heter food there being cooked in a keli that is going to absorb tam now. So when is this food going to become asur? Once it gets the tam. The food is mutter.
But the blia is also mutter.
No, the blia is not mutter. The blia is the blia of nevela. No, I wanted basar b'cholov, but I switched back because it's a really different kind of case. Let's go back to the blias of nevela.
Okay.
What did we say? The blias of nevela don't have to be so defective. They can be just a little bit pogum. So what happens is, what do we say? It's pogum. It's okay. The food is okay. So the question was, the Rashi says, you want to know what the difference here, why I'm lenient with this blias, that they should be just a little pogum? The pagima of an overnight is because with nevela, the real nevela, it's usher from the very beginning. That food is usher for me to eat. I wanted to eat it, it has to be completely non-edible. With Food being cooked in a pot that is an eino ben yoimo, the food is mutter. Elamai, you want the tam of the nevela in the k'deira to make it aser? You see what I mean? I'm starting with food that's mutter. Now something is going to make that food aser. It's enough if that's something, that tam is a little bit pogum, not to make it aser. Because we're only dealing with the tam.
And how are you comparing it to? I don't understand yet.
Nevela, I have a nevela. It's a piece of nevela. Really treif. I can't eat it now. It's also for me to eat. You want me to be able to eat it? It has to be completely naroy lachila. Here I have food that is mutter. I'm cooking in a pot. Elamai, you want the tam of the blias, of the nevela, to aser this? That tam will not aser this food if it's a little pogum. Because right now the food is mutter. I have no problem eating the food. It's just that I'm going to aser it because of the tam, the blias in the tam. For tam to aser, if it's a little pogum, it will not do the job. We will not be machmir on tam asering food as we are machmir with the actual iser itself. Tam asering food, if it's a little pogum, it will not work. It will not aser. Real iser, it better be very, very pogum. See the difference? One is the real iser, one is the tam of the iser, trying to aser the food that is really now mutter for me to eat. Oh, but you want to aser it in the tam? The tam, even if the tam is a little pogum, it's okay. That's how the Rashba explains the difference between the two. Why one is stricter, needs to be really pogum, the other one not. All right, by real quickly, as far as Tois and Tam Lefgam, we learned that in the Taaruvot that if you have more, the only time you say Nois and Tam Lefgam is also if the Nois and Tam Lefgam, the Isur is if the Isur and the heter are the same, mechzal mechza, or if the Isur is for sure more than the heter, then you're not going to say Nois and Tam Lefgam is mutter. Unless it's pure Tam. Not if it's the Isur. If the Isur is there, but it's pogum, it better be the smaller of the two. If the Isser is as much as the heter, or the Isser is more than the heter, the Nois and Tam Lefgam does not work. Unless it's only Tam. But if it's the real Isser, you need to have it less. That was also, we would cover that in Taaruvot. What's interesting is we also learned in Taaruvot, what happens if something is good, then it becomes pogum. Or something that is pogum, and then it becomes good, if you remember that. If something is pogum, and then becomes the shvach, it's aser.
I'm going to enjoy it.
But it's pogum.
But it became shvach. Now that I'm eating it, it's shvach.
Why is it if something is l'shvach and then becomes pogum, it's aser? It's mutter.
Because there was a time when it was l'shvach, it became already aser, and now it's becoming lifgam. Doesn't take away the aser that's already there.
Very good. So that's the difference, right? Something that was once upon a time already aser, and later on became lifgam, it remains aser. Something that was lifgam, even though later on it became l'shvach, I think in that case, real quickly.
Right now I'm enjoying it. What do I care?
Right.
Somewhere along the way, since it was l'fkam, it didn't aser it.
Right.
And now it's asering it. It didn't become less of an iser just because it was l'fkam somewhere along the way.
אבל אם השביח הוא לבסוף או פויגם, או פויגם ולבסוף השביח. Also, anyway, the Mechaber,
both are equally
answers equally. The only question was why something was l'shvach first, and then became pogum. So you said it very right. If something was already l'shvach, and then became pogum, right? It's already answered in the beginning. Yeah. All right. Let's see here. As far as Nois and Tam Lefgam in the Kalim, that the Torah was only answering K'der Bas Yoimo, because if it's Eino Bas Yoimo, it's not Nois and Tam Lefgam. The question is, what does it to the Keli to make it a Gam? Is it Lina Slaila or is it a Me'is La'is? That was another machlokes.
I think it's Rashi. That's
right, exactly. You remember, right? Rashi and even Tosfos seem to be saying the night by itself, you don't need 24 hours. The night does something to it to make it pogum. Others
so it has to go through night.
Right. Others require me'is la'is.
That was Rashi.
Yeah, Rashi and Tosfos. Yeah.
No, it was Rashi.
No. It was Rashi. Yeah. Lina Slaila. Tosfos also says the same thing. Rabbeinu Baruch says that you need a me'is la'is. In the and the Tur is Paskin. That's how we Paskin, I think. That pretty much everybody holds that you need a me'is la'is. But you know what? Because there are shittas that hold linas laila sufficient, you can sometimes be metzar of it if you have some sort of suffix that linas laila is sufficient. It was overnight. All right. We also have the case of cooking vegetables. The Rashba brings down a case of you cooked vegetables after you cooked meat in a pot. He says that the vegetables already took away a little bit of the flavor of the meat inside the pot. So even though you cooked later on milk, it wouldn't present so much of a problem. We don't hold like this, Rashba. But it does make a difference if you cook the water within the 24 hours of cooking the meat. Because for the most part, we hold that you need to, when you hold that it was not used for day, it was not used for anything. If it was used to cook water, it could be a problem. Remember that, Dilan? You cooked water in the pot within the 24 hours. It's not like it has to sit there and not be used at all for it to be a real.
Well, that's the shayla.
That's a shayla. That's a machlokes. Exactly.
But I don't remember who it is who says. But after all, if the blias were still fresh and they went to the water,
right.
What goes back from the water into the walls of the pot is not the blias. What goes back into the walls of the pot is mixture of water with blias.
Right.
So depending on how much water is in that pot, only a certain proportion of it will return into the walls.
Yeah. I think that's more like what the Rashba was saying.
And therefore he permits it. That's one opinion.
The Rashba does say that there's a difference between if you had nevela cooked in that pot, and even though you cooked later on vegetables, you can never be matter to cook kosher food in that pot by making that assumption. No, I already had a partial hagala when I cooked the vegetables, because there's always that mitzvah say, remember, of having to be making hagala to the keli of akum. If you're not going to do that, you cannot cook in it kosher food. So the only time he allows the cooking of vegetables to help us, even though we don't hold like him, is in Basar and Chalav, which each one are heter by themselves, but not with nevela.
So how does that argument go? The Maisa, the accomplishment of cooking vegetables in that pot should be, with respect to removing the ister from the walls of the pot, should be the same accomplishment, regardless of whether it's basar b'chalav in the pot or whether it's nevela in the pot.
What should be the same?
The accomplishment of cooking the vegetables, as far as removing the iser out of the walls of the pot.
Yeah, but Rashba says that you're not allowed.
So it's because it's a knas. It's because mitzvah ba'der chaveira.
No. The Rashba says that you cannot get away with it because you still have a mitzvah. You still have there's a need to make hagala.
What does the mitzvah exactly accomplish?
So it means that the vegetables that you cook are not considered a hagala for a partial hagala. So you have to do a real hagala. That's all he says.
I mean, the whole point, I think, it begins with, if you cook milk in a fleishig pot,
right.
Who is it? Who permits to use the pot for either meat or milk?
Yeah, we'll see that.
So that's the beginning of this discussion.
Right. Anyway, we also discussed, we mentioned several times that if any time you have Isser Ba'in on a pot, like fat residues, it does not become nois and tam lefgam. You want to make sure that the keli is clean.
Right.
The Shach brings down over here the stam kelim are nekiyim.
The Ramar also says
here or later on.
The Ramar also says the same thing. With a knife.
Exactly. With a knife, sure. You want to check it. But Steve Shach says you don't have to worry because stam kelim are clean, and we don't have a problem with it. The last issue that we will see, and that is just important to note, is that even though we hold nois and tam lefgam is mutter, there are some things that can neutralize or undo the benefits of nois and tam lefgam, and that's called the davar charif. Mechalil l'shvach, according to some. The Rashba says it's not mechalil l'shvach. I don't care what hot spice you use, but a lot of them.
But that's not,
Yeah, well, that's a case of the knife. It depends. But not nois and tam lefgam. There's two separate things. There's a davar charif as far as what it does to a nois and tam lefgam, right?
That's called mechalil l'shvach.
Right. Does that rejuvenate the taste of something that was pogum? And then you have other issues of davar charif concerning ducha de sakin and all those things. In other words, that it's more of a problem. Yeah.
Right, that's something else. No, but mechalil l'shvach, the case of the Gemara of mechalil l'shvach, isn't it?
So the Gemara, the case that everybody pretty much agrees to is with chilsis.
Oh, chilsis. Well, what was that? What is the translation of it?
I have to look it up. I don't remember. Yeah, I don't remember right now. That's another machlokes. Does it apply only to chilsis?
Right. Exactly.
Or does it apply to everything that is hot as well?
Yeah.
So that's going to be very interesting to see, because we're going to be talking about that too. What's interesting is that Mechaber was Mekel and Siman Tzadik Vav, and he was Machem in Kuv Gimel about Dover Chorev. The Pri Megadim says the reason for that is because in Taaruvot he's talking about Isser. And here we're talking about Basar B'chalav. Remember, the situation is quite different. Here we're talking about Heter and Heter. It could be that this would make a difference. Okay, I think this is enough for now, just to give us a little bit of an idea of some of the concepts that we will be encountering. These are very important concepts because they apply to both Basar B'chalav and Taaruvot. Tam Ke'ikar, and Tam Lefgam, Dover Chorev, the various Shitas, and that's what we'll be starting with Hashem next week from Tzadik Gimel, as to what actually is the problem when you cook Chalav in Ekter Shel Basar, or Basar in Ekter Shel Chalav. In other words, ultimately we're dealing with a very unique Isser, the Isser of Basar B'chalav, the combination of the two which can present a problem of Isser B'hana too. And there are situations where you have no cure for it, because if it's a Kli Cheres that you can't make Hagala, what are you going to do? Can you use it for a flower pot? And the answer is not necessarily, because if something is also you see, so that's that's why the Basar B'chalav is a very different situation. But it's important to know that the Tam of Gam part, because when it comes to the kitchen, a lot of problems can be avoided if we knew exactly when the last time the keli was used, and if you know how much was used in that keli, how much was actually cooked in that keli within the 24 hours. In other words, if it was used within 24 hours, okay, but how much was used? If only a little bit was cooked, well, against that little bit, I don't have a problem. But if you don't know, then you have to be Meshar, Shishim Keneged, the whole thing, which could be a problem. Exactly. Anyway, we'll see that in Hashem.